See, I'm here in the back of Target, and I see these tankers, right? So I went and I talked to someone that works here, and they said that it's their stuff for the shelves. And I was like, well, don't you get trucks for that? You know, like normally you don't have to keep stuff in bins, right? And because the parking lot usually doesn't look like this with all this fencing, you can usually drive through here and into the other part and so on. Well, they said, well, yeah, but with the virus having made it to America, the United States, they're preparing their stores for the ability to be able to still stock their shelves in the event that something happens, because trade will stop. They said trade will stop. And when it does, they won't have stuff to supply their shelves. So to be able to keep their shelves supplied with things, hopefully throughout whatever stops, they're hoping to be able to do that. I'll show you the front of Target as well for all of this. Here we are at the front entrance to Target. They already have this area ready to close off when they need to. You can see the Target sign there. Right over there by that stop sign right there, right over here is where we were a minute ago. But they have all of the tanks, and the other end there has a close-off part too, so that just the employees can roam about this area. So when this happens, they got their dumpsters ready for all their trash, for the stuff that they're going to need to throw out, because nobody's going to be picking up trash. All of these containers contain the stuff that they're going to need to be able to continue serving people through the store in the front over here. Okay? They're going to close it off there, and they're going to close it off here, and the employees will be in this area only. They've got bathrooms ready. This is Target. The garden section is empty. There's nothing in there. It's all emptied out because they're going to need this area for moving stuff around and situating things. It's all empty. Okay? They said they're sure that the virus is going to spread no matter what. So they don't know when is the only thing. They're just figuring out when now. So they got their dumpsters ready to throw stuff away because nobody's going to be picking up garbage. And they're going to close it off there. And they've got more tanks, more shipping containers all the way up to the front. All the way up to the front up there, with all their stuff that they're going to need to keep the shelves stocked, because nobody's going to be moving anything. Everyone's going to be sick pretty much. And as people recover, they'll be able to go back to work and keep things going, so they hope. But they're preparing, obviously. They're obviously preparing for what's coming. And they know it's coming. They're not going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars like this putting up temporary fencing and stuff to keep people out on rollers so they can close it off when they need to. They're not going to do this for nothing, folks, okay? So they're going to close this part off and that part off, and they'll be able to situate themselves in this area with employees, or whatever it's going to be for. But that's the story I'm given by the employees, is that it's for preparation of the virus so that they'll have supplies. Who knows? This could all be FEMA stuff. We really don't know. But the narrative story that I'm given by the employees is that they're preparing for the virus to come, and they want to have stock for the shelves in the event that that happens. Because, you know, we're looking at a few weeks, 3 to 4 weeks, maybe 6 weeks of everybody being in chaos and sick and shit, and then it will pass. But until then, this is what stores are doing to prepare. What are you doing? This is OC. Check you guys later. Please click like, subscribe, share this video with everyone you know. We can make a difference, but we must speak up.
車都準備搞這個樣嘅，衝鋒車、手車。OK。
And all his millions of dollars he has spent on bunkers. Now, Bill Gates is a guy like me. He's rational. He's not a cuckoo. Neither am I. But no, Bill Gates has been talking so long about the things that really scare him. You got to think about this. When the richest man of the world is worried about something and he's spending his own money, and the rumors are tens of millions of dollars on some of these lavish bunkers that he's got, you better listen, because that man is on the inside and you are on the outside. Trust me, he's part of the Billionaires group. He's part of the New World Order. That man is on the know, okay, in the know. And I mean, even more than President of the United States. President doesn't get invited to the Billionaires group and all that stuff, but Bill Gates does. Okay, so anyway, so all these articles are on the news. So if you guys want to have some fun, get on Google and start Googling these things. I'm going to read some of these articles. I want you to look at them. If you don't think that he's worried about that, look at this article. It says, Bill Gates and America's millionaires are building underground survival bunkers. Here's another one. How scared should I be? A contagious disease will wipe out humanity. Here's another one. Billionaires are preparing for the apocalypse. Do they know something you don't know? Another one. Bill Gates fears plague that could wipe out humanity. Here's another one. Bill Gates thinks a coming disease could wipe out or could kill 30 million people within 6 months and says we should prepare for it as we do war. And these articles are everywhere, guys. I mean, I'm just not making this stuff up. But you know, the one that I like the most is this one here that was printed by News Punch. And I'm going to read it to you because he actually quotes me in this one. I like this. It says, Bill Gates builds nuclear bunker, tells staff to leave the country. Bill Gates urgently ordered the construction of a nuclear bunker at his Seattle property and has advised long-term employees to leave the United States before the following weekend, says a member of the staff. He didn't say how long we should be away, but he said we should definitely leave before the following weekend, said Mr. Hall, a pool technician who says he watched the construction of the nuclear bunker and explains it is large enough to comfortably hold a handful of people only. Besides the nuclear bunker, several smaller tunnels and bunkers were built underneath the main residence, connecting them up to a forum to a small underground fortress. Explaining the bunker has entrances and exits large enough for vehicles, as well as, listen to this here, guys, escape tunnels, decontamination rooms, Swiss-made air purifiers, and bulletproof hatches. Where have we ever heard that before? So, guys, when you get a bunker, make sure you got escape tunnels, decontamination rooms, the Swiss-made air filtration system, and bulletproof hatches. Otherwise, your shelter is not going to be the shelter you dreamed of. See what I mean? Told you I said that before somewhere. Bill Gates apparently approved of the final construction only after being repeatedly assured he and two others would survive in the underground structure in the event of a 500,000-pound blast, which is half of a megaton. Guys, let's listen to Bill Gates in this interview. Let's hear the words from his own mouth.
Fortunately, there's very few things, and most of them are very low probability. Some big volcanic explosion, gigantic earthquake, asteroid. Well, at least in the nuclear case, you've got to say we take it quite seriously. We budget a lot of money, have a lot of people who think about nuclear deterrence, and I'm very glad that work's being done, and I rate the chance of a nuclear war in my lifetime as being fairly low. I rate the chance of a widespread epidemic far worse than Ebola in my lifetime is well over 50%. If we look at the 20th century and we look at the death chart of the 20th century, I think everybody would say, oh yeah, there must be a spike for World War I. Sure enough, there it is, like 25 million. And there must be a big spike for World War II, and there it is, it's like 65 million. But But then you'll see this other spike that is as large as World War II, right after World War I. And most people, a lot of people would say, well, what? What was that? There's two kinds of flus. There's flus that spread between humans very effectively, and there's flus that kill lots of people. And those two properties have only been combined into a widespread flu once in history. Well, that is Spanish flu. We have no idea where it came from. It's called the Spanish flu because the Spanish press was the freest. They were the first to talk openly about it. And so in the annals of epidemic history, that's the big event. I funded a disease modeling group that uses computer simulation, and that work has been phenomenal in helping us target our polio eradication resources and which parts of Nigeria should we work harder on. And it's very natural if you have a group like that to say, hey, look at something like the Spanish flu in the modern day. Health systems are far better. And so you think, hey, that wouldn't be very bad. Well, we tried it, and there are some assumptions we had to make. But what we showed is that the force of infection because of modern transport, which compared to 1918 is over 50 times as great. And so if you get something like a flu and you look at that map of how within days it's basically in all urban centers of the entire globe, that is very eye-opening. That didn't happen with Spanish flu in the past. The opportunity to do more than just let it run its course is really only in the last decade. Basically, when you talk about drugs, you can talk about small molecules or talk about these complex biological protein-like things, of which there's a subclass called antibodies. Antibodies are the molecules that the immune system naturally builds to attack disease. Today, the idea that somebody says, oh, here's an antibody, make a lot of it, make it very quickly, that's right on the cutting edge. And the Ebola epidemic showed me that we're not ready for a serious epidemic, an epidemic that would be more infectious and would spread faster than Ebola did. This is the greatest risk of a huge tragedy. This is the most likely thing by far to kill over 10 million excess people in a year. We don't need to invest nearly what we do in military preparedness. This is something where less than $1 billion a year on R&D, medical surveillance, standby personnel, cross-training the military so they can play a role in terms of all the logistics here. This can be done, and we may not get many more warnings like this one to say, okay, it's a pretty modest investment to avoid something that really, in terms of the
Beyonce taught us that girls run the world, but sadly the queen bee is gravely mistaken. Throughout history, power has always been concentrated in the hands of the few, from the first tribal chieftains and their shamans to today's political elite. But sometimes that power has been held firmly within bloodlines, passed down from generation to generation like a very unearned inheritance. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Infographic Show. Today we're taking a look at the most powerful families in the world. 5. Rothschild family. With a name that pops up in nearly every conspiracy theory out there, it's no surprise that the Rothschilds would end up on this list. Whether they're responsible for assassinating JFK to ensure he didn't invade Cuba and thus destroy the lucrative sugar market, to having secretly financed 9/11 on behalf of the aliens from Zeti Reticuli so they could eat our brains. If there's a conspiracy theory out there, chances are the Rothschilds are at the center of it. With a family history such as the Rothschilds, though, it's hard to blame conspiracy theorists. Rising from a lowly apprentice working at a small Hamburg bank, Mayer Rothschild displayed from an early age a keen interest and talent for finances. In no time at all, Mayer had made himself a prominent member of the global banking industry and would go on to install his 5 sons around the financial capitals of Europe, overseeing operations from London to Berlin. The Rothschilds helped stabilize international currencies through their lending and banking practices with individual governments. While this was generally a good thing as it kept markets stable and people employed, the Rothschilds certainly earned a very very pretty penny for their charitable work. As Europe plunged along the Industrial Revolution, the Rothschilds were there to finance Europe's favorite hobby, waging horrible wars against itself, mostly staying on the right side of history though. The Rothschilds were quick to lend England about $10 billion in today's dollars to help finance their war effort against Napoleon Bonaparte. By this time, the Rothschilds' fortune was so vast and their financial network so elaborate that they actually received the news of Napoleon's defeat at Waterloo a full day before the British government. Such stunning displays of international power and reach have for a long time cast the Rothschilds under extreme suspicion, and they've throughout history been blamed for pretty much every major war or other catastrophe, often portrayed as nothing more than money-hungry and evil to the point of profiteering from human misery. The truth, however, is that the Rothschilds were simply a family extraordinarily gifted in the world of finance, and their charitable contributions to human society are some of the greatest in history and continue to this day. Or perhaps the Rothschilds paid us to say that, so you won't figure out that they're secretly working for the Zeta Reticuli aliens who definitely don't want to eat your brains. 4. Rockefeller family. If there's a name synonymous with the international power and intrigue of the Rothschilds, it's the Rockefellers. John D. Rockefeller was born in rural New York to a father who was a con man and a mother who was deeply religious. Unlike his shuckster family, John was often described as a serious, polite, and honest young man. And at age 17, he began working as a bookkeeper at a small produce farm. Working long hours, Rockefeller delighted in the intricacies of the work, yet had a keen mind for finances and budgeting. Seeing an opportunity with the advent of the internal combustion engine, Rockefeller started a business partnership with a friend and his brothers, going into the business of refining oil at a time when everybody else was busy trying to pump it out of the ground. The discovery of giant oil reserves in Texas and the growing exploitation of oil in the Middle East made it clear that this new resource was the wave of the future, and yet very little infrastructure existed for the actual refining of oil into fuel and other products. The oil gold rush had seen entrepreneurs open up prospecting and drilling companies around the world, but a growing need for oil processing was being unmet. This is where Rockefeller and the family came into play. Founding Standard Oil in 1870, Rockefeller's wealth exploded, and he would go on to end up controlling 90% of America's oil pipelines and refineries. After his family's monopoly was broken up by antitrust laws in 1911, the Rockefellers continued to hold on to a large share of national oil production industry. At the time of his death in 1937, John D. Rockefeller was valued at about $340 billion in today's dollars, or 4 times more than Bill Gates. However, in the time since the record high, a rise in international competition and lack of a similar talent for finances by Rockefeller's descendants has seen the family wealth plummet down to an estimated $11 billion, though somehow we suspect that they get along just fine with only $11 billion. 3. The Morgan family. Born to a banker, it's no surprise that John Pierpont Morgan would follow in his father's footsteps and become a banker himself. However, unlike his father, John would go on to found one of the world's most important financial institutions, J.P. Morgan & Company. During a scare in 1893 over the outflow of the U.S.'s surplus gold to foreign nations, the U.S. economy looked set to plummet. But in these dire times, John saw an opportunity that no others did. Putting together a syndicate of bankers, which included the Rothschilds, Morgan used U.S. bonds to buy back gold from foreign investors, thus restoring public faith in the dollar and stabilizing the economy. This gold and bond exchange, however, allowed Morgan to effectively control the U.S. gold supply, which let him finance the creation of U.S. Steel and General Electric, while buying out all competitors, effectively taking over 2 of the most important financial sectors of the entire nation, steel and electricity. Morgan's control over the nation's gold supply at the time, when the national economy and most global economies as well were tied to the gold standard, allowed Morgan to manipulate the economy to raise or lower the value of the dollar and consumer prices. And despite ensuring a measure of fiscal responsibility, this is overwhelmingly why the gold standard is a bad thing, no matter what your belligerently libertarian uncle posts on your Facebook wall every other week. Known as an unethical and cutthroat businessman, Morgan bought out, bullied out, or outcompeted any competitors by slashing jobs, reducing wages, and generally doing away with anything even remotely related to workplace safety. If it wasn't generating money, it wasn't worth his time. And after all, the nation was full of peasants to replace those killed or maimed in horrific industrial accidents. With no minimum wage laws or workplace safety standards, Morgan effectively built an empire on heaps and heaps of exploitation and human misery, which, by the way, is why minimum wage and workplace safety legislation are important things to have. Sometimes government regulations are a good thing to have, though we tend to forget that since we're so far separated from the misery of the Industrial Revolution and its mass exploitation of the average worker, in modern modern times, not much has changed, with JP Morgan widely blamed for helping spread the practices of predatory lending, which led to the 2008 global financial crash. Rumors of the Morgan family being war profiteers and generally banking on any human misery that will make them a single penny are popular. And you know what? Given the family's past, this time it's clear that if anybody is cooperating with the aliens from Zeta Reticuli to eat your brains, it's definitely the Morgans. Yet with such a commanding grip on the global economy, there's little the individual consumer can do to avoid engaging in a JP Morgan-backed business. 2. DuPont family. Sired by a French immigrant who emigrated to the United States in the 1800s, the DuPont family has built an empire based on manufacturing and the distribution of industrial chemicals and military munitions. Initially establishing the family business as a gunpowder manufacturer, DuPont quickly became the largest supplier of gunpowder to the U.S. military and would go on to begin creating dynamite in industrial proportions. Like so many other monopolies, the DuPont monopoly was broken up in the early 1900s under the Sherman Antitrust Act, but the family still managed to maintain a huge market share of the global munitions industry, having supplied nearly 40% of all the munitions used by Allied forces during the First World War. Unlike the Morgan family, however, the DuPonts felt at least some obligation to the nation they were profiting from, and so during World War II, when the US government needed help producing plutonium for the war-ending Manhattan Project, the DuPont company designed and built one of the largest plutonium plants in the country, all while keeping it an absolute secret to prevent the Axis powers from discovering the US's research. In the 1950s, after the Soviets exploded their first atomic bomb, the DuPont company once more cooperated with the US government to help America develop the hydrogen bomb, hoping to help the US's edge over their Soviet competitors. Working hand in hand with the US government, DuPont helped focus the efforts of the nation's scientists, all while being handsomely compensated by the US government, of course. The DuPonts may be the second most powerful family in the world, but are surprisingly the subject of very few wild-eyed conspiracy theories, except for one. Blamed for helping spur the US's prohibition of hemp and cannabis in 1937 in order to protect its paper and nylon manufacturing, the DuPonts have often been the target of those who see overly restrictive anti-marijuana laws as unfair and needless. The widespread use of hemp as a manufacturing product would, after all, cut into DuPont's earnings. Yet if marijuana was legalized nationally, there's little doubt that DuPonts wouldn't simply immediately engage in the growing and processing of hemp products. And with their vast wealth to back their entrepreneurial efforts, they would be doing so from a commanding lead versus any other competitor. 1. The Bush family. Best known for Presidents George W. Bush and George Bush Sr., the Bush family began its climb to international power with Prescott Sheldon Bush, a U.S. banker and senator. For years, the family was accused of hugely profiteering from World War II and for having established businesses with corporations that financed Hitler's government. And the reveal of declassified documents in 2003 showed several questionable transactions that could have been in violation of the Trading with Enemies Act. However, after it was revealed in 1943 that a Polish mining interest Prescott Bush was invested in was using forced labor from Auschwitz, Bush distanced himself and engaged in the collection of funds for victims of the war. The rest of the Bush family hasn't escaped scrutiny though, with both presidents having been blamed for profiting from the wars that started under their watch. These allegations may be a bit more of a stretch than those against Prescott Bush, however, as it's a well-known fact that George Bush Sr. was very reluctant about starting a war with Iraq, and it was the consistent prodding from Britain that finally spurred him into action. Whatever the case, having had two members become president.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's OC. So, sitting here with Rue. We're going to have some lunch here at Steak and Shake. But as you can see, we're right here across from Holiday. Right here. And you can see all the tanks, all of the containers over there. But I don't really know what to say anymore. I mean, it's kind of surreal just watching everything go on as if nothing's happening. That's what's so crazy, that the mainstream media is able to capture people so much to where life just continues on. Nobody's... It's just crazy, you know? But things are happening, and things are going to continue to happen, and people are going to start getting more and more sick here. It made it here, so it's only a matter of time before it gets as bad as it is there, and everywhere that it's touched so far. Who knows how long it was bad in China before they really let people know. So people like Target are not going to be preparing like that. unless something was happening. They're not going to spend the money. They just don't do that. Their idea is to make money, not spend it when it's unnecessary. This is obviously necessary. So if they're taking necessary precautions, I believe that means we as people should take necessary precautions too. Not just brush it off like nothing's going to happen. Because once this stuff empties that's on the shelves, and that stuff from the tanks empty into the shelves, and those shelves empty, they won't be getting refilled. They're hoping that whatever happens before those storage containers run out of stuff. That's what they're hoping for.
Since we would
Toilet paper, stuff like that's what I'm guessing is in those things. Toiletry items, cat food, dog food, so on and so forth. So, thanks so much, everybody. Click like, subscribe, share this video with all your friends.